and welcome back, and today we want to talk about two NAS devices for you guys out there that are probably making your first steps into the world of network attached storage, or you kind of entered the world of NAS a good 5, 6, 7 years ago. You went a little bit conservative with a bit of a budget unit, and a few years have gone by, you've seen it slow down a little bit and you want to go for something a little bit more oomph, but at the same time you don't want to break the bank. You're not looking for some mental Xeon powered monstrosity. What you want is something just a tier up from what you've got and is considered the mid-range. And right now, from both of these brands, for home users certainly, these two represent lovely mid-range solutions from Synology and QNAP. We've got the older of the two by only a few months, the Synology DS420 Plus, and this arrives at about 470, 480 quid if you shop around it. That includes tax, but not the hard drive, media or the shipping, of course. And we're comparing it against the brand new QNAP, the latest 4-bay that they put out there, the QNAP DS451D2. Now, they've got very similar hardware architecture, but it has to be said that the QNAP is noticeably lower in price. At the same architecture, because there are memory differences if you go for different tiers in the portfolio, this device arrives at about 50 quid, give or take, maybe 60 quid different, at around £430, including the tax and without the drives and the shipping. So you may be thinking, if price is the most important factor to you, so you're already kind of erring to this end of the table, I ask you just to wait until either till the end of the video or until we get through the meat and veg of the thing, because there's a lot more to this comparison than just the cost, of course. But these two are still great 4-bay solutions from their respective brands. If you're not familiar with Synology or QNAP, I've got to say that in terms of network attached storage and finding a viable alternative to home and small businesses from things like Office 365 and G Suite, as well as the likes of Google Drive, DropBox, OneDrive, stuff like that, they are fantastic solutions. And as their brands are, they're the best alternatives right now from moving away from cloud services, or at the very least having a parallel system running in conjunction with cloud services as a tier of a backup or as a failover if your internet falls through, and intelligent caching. So what will you get if you buy either one of these? What have they got in common? What are they ultimately going to provide to you regardless of which one you buy? Well, first and foremost, they are combined hardware and software solutions. You aren't just buying a piece of kit here, you are buying a piece of hardware that is a great, generally 50-50 split between hardware and software in the cost of your device, although there are differences brand to brand that we'll touch on later on. You are buying a device that can be utilized for any kind of files, really, you know, documents, photos, music, video, PDF, zipped up docs, ISO images, the works. They can handle both, and they both got multiple tiers of applications, both client and host based. Client being your mobile devices, your desktop devices for iOS, Android, and OS X, Windows, the works. There's clients and applications for all of them to integrate with these devices. On top of that, there's a myriad of applications available to be downloaded within the applications themselves via their own graphical user interfaces, or GUI. They're accessed via the web browser, and that web browser portal that you will utilize can also be assisted by multiple client applications for Mac or Windows systems that run localized, kind of synced client applications too. Now, both of them support pretty much all the local web browsers you can think of, and that web browser does give way to that graphical user interface that is comparable to the desktops of Microsoft, Android, and Apple. You can run apps, you can run little tools, there's lots of things you can access via that user interface and those mobile apps too. On top of that, the applications are completely tailored to your data. These days, you're not just buying a hard drive connected to the internet. It is a completely tailored experience with different applications from first and third parties for handling your data that are created around the type of data. So you've got music management tools, video management tools, photo management tools. You've got typical file handling, virtual machine file handling with like images and virtual hard drives, that sort of thing. On top of that, you have then got handling of documentation, so docs, Excel, PDFs, that sort of thing. lots of applications for handling those files in a suitable environment. They've both got great handling of photos as well, with both of them arriving with photo management tools as well as AI-powered photo categorization as well, in the form of Synology Moments, soon to be Synology Photos, and QNAP's QMaggie software. They've both got virtual machine software in Synology Virtual Machine Manager and QNAP Virtualization Station, although I would argue neither of these are particularly great for virtualization based on the architecture inside. Both of them have got surveillance platforms in Surveillance Station and QVR Pro for the QNAP. Although you do get more camera licenses for the QNAP, it has to be said. I think the software on the Synology side is a pinch better, but there's a lot more you can do with like a standalone system. You can do web cameras as well, and a myriad of IP cameras and 8 camera licenses on the QNAP. But so it's kind of an even footing on that. You've got download tools, you've got hosting tools, you've got WordPress tools, you've got website tools, you've got email tools, you've got just a myriad of applications all inside. These are complete solutions. But where they differ in terms of that software, and we'll go into a little bit more detail throughout the video, is the difference between first and third party prioritization. Okay, so we'll touch on that more in the software section later on. But let's talk about the differences between them. What makes one stand out more than the other for you? Because although architecturally they seem very, very similar, there's a few little areas where you can certainly see the brand's priorities take shape. So first and foremost, the CPU inside. They both arrive with the same CPU. It's the Intel Celeron J4025. This CPU ranks pretty high on CPU benchmark, somewhere around 1900, close to 2000. I know that number fluctuates as more CPUs arrive in the market and age and stuff pass by, but that dual-core CPU is a 2.0 gigahertz processor that can be burst up to 2.9 gigahertz. It's also got 4K UHD graphic handling with UHD 600 embedded graphics on that processor. So again, things like 4K, 1080p, and more rendering and graphics-based data manipulation is done a great deal easier thanks to that portion of the CPU, that embedded GPU that is designed to handle those operations, rather than expecting raw CPU power to have to juggle that whole task. On top of that, they both arrive by default with 2 gig of DDR4 memory, but there are differences straight away. The Synology arrives with a higher speed memory at 2666 megahertz. And that 2 gig can be upgraded to 6 gig maximum by installation of a 4 gig Synology module of memory. In the case of the QNAP arrives with 2 gig of DDR4 memory by default, but there is also a 4 gig version arriving at about 460 quid, and there is an 8 gig maximum memory capacity. And that memory is inside with 2 gig by default, and a 4 gig obviously has a 4 gig stick, but the upgradability of this is across 2 slots rather than the 1 slot on this, with the other 2 gigs soldered to the main controller board. And QNAP supports a wider range of memory as well. They support a number of brands like Kingston, Samsung, and stuff like that. And Synology still rigidly maintain they will only provide support on supported memory configurations, i.e. only their own memory, which, although tested and architecturally designed around NAS, one would argue, they've obviously looked at memory and gone for the right one for their system. It has to be said that it is more expensive, with a 4 gig module arriving at about 80 quid on average, sometimes a pinch lower, often a pinch higher, whereas unofficial memory, non-QNAP memory, although they do sell their own memory, has to be said that 4 gig you can generally pick up for about 30 or 40 quid. So, you know, that's a big memory difference between these two devices. Higher speed memory on this, better memory potential and upgradability on this. Now, in terms of design, you can look at these two chassis, and they are very, very much products of their own aesthetics. If we look at them up close, and I'm quite impressed I can hold both of these in one hand each, although I am starting to feel the pain. Synology have gone for a very familiar chassis they've had before. Got the 4 bays there on the front, each is lockable. We've got some ventilation, and we've got a USB port there on the front. Get the thumbnail sorted. There we go, that was easy, wasn't it? On the QNAP there, we've got those 4 bays, all of which are lockable, and we've got a USB port, but that USB there is one-touch copy. There is a one-touch copy button there for backups if you want to have that extra layer of confidence knowing that you've actually actioned it. Slightly glossy there on that line there, that twin black design. On the QNAP, it's got charcoal and kind of glossy black there. A little bit of ventilation there on the side and some ventilation there on the base of the QNAP. But other than that, the main ventilation is that front. Now, in the case of the Synology, ventilation is available on the front, of course, and there's a little bit of ventilation there on the base, and we'll talk about those in a bit. But there's also that lovely ventilation there on the side in the Synology logo, and I love that feature that Synology have included the typical ventilation you would expect from a plastic casing chassis like these two, but they've branded it. It's very slick and it's very Synology. You may have guessed between these two brands that Synology models itself very much in the Apple rhetoric, with QNAP designing themselves a lot more in the Windows and Android side of things. And that is felt when you go through their respective softwares, not only in the aesthetic, but also in how you interact with it. The Synology in DSM 6.2 and 7 around the corner is incredibly streamlined, incredibly user-friendly, arguably too user-friendly for some more technical people, and a lot of the more techie stuff is hidden a few layers deep, which a lot of you may like, but a number of you might not. The QNAP, on the other hand, does present a lot of information to you very early doors. It isn't, it is quite user-friendly. I've got to say, it is user-friendly, but just not quite as user-friendly as that of the Synology. But it does tend to kind of give you a lot of information at any given time, which I know a number of you might not be overly keen on in the software stakes. Continuing talking about the hardware, we can talk about these two and their ports and connections, because although we looked at the front, a lot of you are going to care quite a lot about the rear of these devices. Now, turning them around, as you can see there, between the two of them, let's angle those just right so you guys can actually see them there. We can see that they're actually quite similar. Both of them have got two 1GBE LAN ports there, and that means that on both of these devices you have got up to 2 gigabit Ethernet with link aggregation. It's disappointing that both of them don't have greater than 1GBE connections. Synology, you kind of expect that. The Synology have been very much in the market of 1GBE for quite a while now. They've not really challenged any of the network connections between 1 and 10 gig, and even 10 gig they've left very much at the top end in the likes of their XS series by default. But you have still got two 1GBEs there, which can be link aggregated for up to 2 GBE, or around 220 to 240 megabits per second. QNAP, on the other hand, although they have also only embraced 1GBE on this, their portfolio contains a lot more solutions that have 2.5 GBE, and I'm a little surprised they didn't include 2.5 GB on this. Maybe for fears it would tread on the toes of the 453D, I'm not sure, but it's still a little disappointing there. But there are other differences between them. In the case of the QNAP, there are 4 USB 3 ports total, 1 on the front, 3 on the back. And when I say USB 3, I mean USB 3, alright? I mean USB 3.1 Gen 1 or USB 3.2 Gen 1. The naming convention's gone nuts, hasn't it? Basically, I mean 5 gigabits per second USB. The Synology has 3, 1 on the front, 2 on the back. Although I would argue that USB ports on a NAS between these two devices, you get a lot more out of them on a QNAP. The Synology has them, and although there are a number of supported peripherals, you can put some network Ethernet adapters on there. You can put connected to UPSs or make like printers and scanners network accessible, or even attach the USB to a VM. Once again, not a lot of hardware in this for a VM. But on the QNAP, you can do all of that, but you can also attach, of course, both of them can attach external storage. That's a given for backups to and from, with multiple different backup revisions included. But on the QNAP, you can also use those USB ports for more peripheral devices. You can create a KVM or keyboard video mouse setup on this device. You can attach better Ethernet adapters with the QNAP USB 3 to 5 gigabit Ethernet adapter supported on this device, and you can have multiple of those too. Also, the range of expandability with this device not being expandable officially. You get those 4 bays and that's your lot. You can't add more drives with an expansion. On the QNAP, on the other hand, they have multiple USB expansions in the TR and TL series, which allow you to add further storage down the line on this device with those USB ports. Now, I mentioned KVM, keyboard video mouse, because this device has got an HDMI out. With an HDMI 2.0 port on the QNAP, it means you can attach a monitor, a keyboard and a mouse, a Bluetooth remote control, whatever you want to do, and create a standalone surveillance setup, a standalone VM, standalone multimedia setup, install Plex Media Server. I think third-party app really only it's not available in the HD Station store anymore, and effectively run a parallel direct interface system with this device, while simultaneously having network and internet level access, having all of the features and functionality that QNAP bring to the table. The HDMI port isn't for everyone. I know a number of you out there don't really care about HDMI on your systems. I would use the HDMI predominantly for multimedia. There's a bunch of apps on there to enjoy connecting this device to a 4K 60 frames per second TV, because it is HDMI 2.0 on there. And at the same time, with that HDMI parallel HD Station system, you're also running all of the network and internet level accesses. I know I've already touched on that, but that's because all of this is very, very QNAP. QNAP goes down that road, and they support a number of different ways to interact with the data on your system, which Synology don't really want to enter into with their product for numerous reasons. They see what they, maintain the market, the where it's going, and what people want from their systems, and so they tailor differently. The result is that the Synology is designed to be very much internet and network access only. This is designed to be network or internet access only. There's no real direct interface of it. Along with all the applications too, Synology's software has gone to the real trouble of replacing all of the third-party apps you might be utilizing that center around cloud. Office 365 and its Office applications, Google Drive, DropBox with those one portal access points, file streaming and file pinning with Office 365, Skype, WhatsApp, email clients like Outlook, all of them can be replaced with first-party applications as part of the Synology collaboration suite. Synology Chat, Synology Office, Synology Drive, Synology Calendar, Synology Mail, loads of applications all inclusive of that, and it's designed to be a complete solution that allows you to get rid of that third-party stuff that you're utilizing. But if you like using those third-party apps, if you like having Office 365 for your docs and Excel documents and stuff like that, you like utilizing Skype, you like utilizing those third-party clients and want a NAS to work around those, although some of that is supported on the Synology, it is not supported as much as by QNAP, which already has a range of first-party applications, but it has a greater support than Synology of third-party apps, like the ones I've listed. So there's plugins, there's apps available in their App Center for that with regards to Skype, with regard to everything as far as Spotify on the HDMI output, with a Microsoft Office plugin for File Station. There's a lot more third-party support on the QNAP, and that's that 50-50 balance I alluded to earlier on. The QNAP just finds that middle line a little bit better, but sometimes it's to its detriment, because a number of you will buy these solutions, and when you use the QNAP, there's so much being thrown at you. You're like, whoa, I didn't want any of this. I just wanted my data. And that's where you're going to be more of a Synology buyer. Now, between these two, there are other differences. Of course, there is the difference of warranty. If you buy both of them, the QNAP has 2 years of warranty. The Synology has 3, and I know that's very, very important to some business users as a mark of consistency by a brand long-term in a product. It's not foolproof, but it's definitely an indicator there. Internally, although they've both got multi-tiered backup and snapshot and multi-platform backup strategies in Hyper Backup and Active Backup Suite, and on the Synology and on the QNAP, you have got Hyper Backup Sync 3, you have got multi-tiered QSync and QNAP backup tools for cloud management and localized management. You've got virtual JBOD to port your storage externally. You've got hybrid mount to make cloud services appear localized, things that are coming in DSM-7 from Synology. But probably one of the biggest surprises between them is, although both of them arrive with support of ext4 traditional file system, the Synology also has support of BTRFS, which, although a younger file system compared with ext4, does arrive with lower resource consumption, creating snapshots in the background, which is very, very handy long term, and file self-healing when a checksum is created between transmission of data internally, much like ECC memory does, and if it notices a problem, compares it against the original and repairs. So these are things that BTRFS brings to the table, and although QNAP doesn't have BTRFS on their system because they believe it too young, they do support ZFS on their bigger systems, although that's not really appropriate here. Now, there's only really one last, for me, major difference between these two devices, and it's something I touched on earlier on. It's the fact that Synology arrives with two NVMe SSD caching bays. It allows you to install two superfast NVMe SSDs inside this device and utilize them for caching. Now, this is something that's just not present on the QNAP whatsoever. Now, generally at this price point, this is you never see NVMe SSD caching. It provides benefits to small files. It provides benefits to more frequently accessed files. If you've got a shared drive by multiple people, the system will know that these are the core files that are being accessed most frequently, and it will move copies or parts of that system of data onto the cache. And by move, I mean clone. It won't move it away from the hard drives. It will just copy it, which is very, very beneficial. And the system will learn the data that's been the most access and will flush and rebuild as needed. Now, this is a big part of what Synology is doing in their 2020 and 2021 series. Pretty much all of the Plus series have NVMe SSD caching bays inside. Now, you can do this on the QNAP, but you've got to use SATA SSDs and you'll lose your bays. And if that sounds like something you're going to utilize, you're just not going to get it from the QNAP. It has to be said. The Synology brings that, and it brings that across most of the Plus series. And once again, goes into that idea of largely supporting network and internet access thanks to that intelligent caching that those SSD bring, leveraging high IOPS and high performance and speed, and bestowing that performance on the larger, arguably slower hard drive array overall. Now, the QNAP, obviously, with its architecture, which it's trying to support as many users as possible, might leave some people feeling a little confused. But I think if you are looking for a direct access means, if you are looking for standalone HDMI KVM, if you are a Windows or Android user, if you're a PC gamer, if you are someone that wants the system to be built around the way you work, not the other way around, the QNAP is very desirable, and of course a little bit easier on the price tag. But if you're new to NAS, if you want something that's going to hold your hand, if you are looking for streamlined set up and forget, if you are looking for long-term performance, if you are looking for support long-term, chances are the Synology is going to be the one for you. But this has been the Synology DS420 Plus versus the QNAP DS451D2. Hope you guys have enjoyed this. I will be looking at how this device compares against a number of other systems in the next week or two. The reason being, this is a very unusual release. I think the 451D2, it's been released after a lot of arguably more powerful or more equipped systems, and I'm interested to see how this device compares with them, given that it's been released afterwards. Is this a swan song, or is this a very, very good idea to find a better place in their portfolio? Ultimately, watch the videos and find out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Click like if you did, and click subscribe to learn more. And I'll see you next time.